Hi, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast on the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creator of Out of Frame, the video series on YouTube, and the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education. With me today, as always, is Jen Maffasanti and Paul Nelson. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
We've been dealing with a lot lately in terms of getting YouTube to do what we want in terms of exporting and uploading some new videos and things like that today. So it's been kind of a stressful day today, and one of those videos is going to be, and we're recording this a little bit before the release, but is going to be our new Out of Frame episode on cancel culture. It's ultimately around the movie Tropic Thunder, but the Out of Frame episode, I think, covers that pretty well. So one of the things we want to talk about today is to get into cancel culture and all that kind of stuff. So stick around and listen for that discussion in a few minutes. In the meantime, how are you guys doing? What are you watching? What are you, what are you enjoying on TV right now, Paul?
Well, Jen and Sean know this, hate this about me.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, that's too strong.
Dislike this about me.
Find it incredibly amusing about
are
you.
Amused by it.
Probably
Sure.
accurate.
I surprise myself as well, but I love trashy reality TV shows. And one of the longest running, and maybe one of the original, Big Brother started. We're recording this on a day after the season premiere.
Yeah, that had to have been. It's sort of the first, right?
It's 20 years old.
Survivor's got to be about that old too.
It's
right?
roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
Reality
Survivor's,
TV has grown up.
17-ish years old, Survivor is.
I
think Big Brother takes that crown.
All right, you have to talk about what you have on deck here, but like we're going to talk about cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
Survivor actually was nobody had any power, but I remember when I was a kid, when Survivor came on, there was a conservative talk radio film reviewer named Michael Medved,
mm-hmm.
who thought it was the end of the world. He thought Survivor was going to be like the death of television. He was also, by the way, not entirely wrong.
Jersey Shore happened.
Jersey Shore did happen.
And I loved it.
It does exist. But it just goes back to the early 2000s, little pockets of cancel culture,
yeah.
little pockets of like people trying to do what they're much more successful at doing now and trying to.
Right, everybody just rolled their eyes at them nowadays. Yes.
Absolutely. But yeah, so what are you watching in your trashy reality show world?
So Big Brother, just like I said, just started. So that's going to be my life for the next couple months. They have live feeds, guys. You can watch them whenever you want.
This is new, Big Brother. You're not going back to the beginning.
No, this is
watching.
No, gosh, no. But that would be funny though, because 1999 or 2000
yeah,
TV.
That
would probably be a big shock. But
back when. It's like that was basically when MTV like completely abandoned the idea of ever running music programs ever again. They're like, we're done.
Wink. No, we're just going straight into MTV Cribs and all that stuff.
Cribs. Oh my God. Now that's just YouTube shows though. Now, I mean, that's the funny thing is I watch that kind of stuff. Like I watch Architectural Digest videos, which is just Cribs. Like that's all it is. Like,
and the quality's better.
Oh, it's way better. It's so much better. But
YouTube is amazing.
It's like I watched one on Aaron Paul's house in like Idaho. He's from Idaho, and he went and like bought this. Probably in Idaho, it's probably only a couple $1 million, but it is amazing. It's one of the best houses I've ever seen. It's like this incredible like log cabin that was built out of like 3 different barns that they connected, and it's he and his wife have insanely good taste. It's just one of the best things I've ever seen.
But is there a room where the magic happens?
Probably. Yes. There are probably a lot of rooms where the magic happens in that place. You get like an oak bar downstairs. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the reality TV I watch. Like that's literally like that's the extent of.
YouTube is magnificent.
It is.
I know we're going to talk about cancel culture, and YouTube has a lot of issues with that.
Yeah.
But it astounds me to what I stumble upon just through the recommendations. I am now watching flight simulator videos because Microsoft is about to release. So I'm like finding myself watching 20-minute long videos about this guy taking off from some airport in France. I'm like,
Yeah.
you guys are doing something right with their algorithm. So YouTube's good. But yeah, reality TV, I'm here for it. It is so much fun.
Oh my goodness. I have not been watching that much reality. I think I said this on the show recently, watching just sort of an endless stream of HGTV, which we were talking about may or may not qualify as reality TV. It is it's super scripted. It really is. Like a Property Brothers episode is literally the same episode over and over and over again.
Which is nice though.
And that's why I was watching it, honestly, is because like it was mostly stuff I was having on in the background, and the beats are so incredibly clear. Like I guarantee you their editors just have literally like markers or templates. They have like different sequences that they're just like, okay, I need 4.5 minutes of blank, and then 5 minutes of this beat, and then 4 minutes of that beat, and then 2 minutes of this, couple little interstitials, and that's the show.
Yep.
You know, and so every episode's got to be the easiest thing in the world to edit because they just have it down. But I actually went back to watching narrative programming recently, thanks to you, Jen, because we're doing a short episode on Carnival Row, which will probably be out by the time this airs. And so I went back and rewatched Carnival Row again.
Worth it.
Loved it again. Really, really good. Did you haven't actually paused and actually watched?
I haven't
this
watched
yet,
it,
but
I need to edit. I'm going to edit.
He's going to have to edit it.
So I will know quite
You'll
a bit
have it
about
all right there.
Right.
Yeah. Boy, I really, really, really love that show. And the more times I revisit it, the more I really, really enjoy it, because it's just such it fits exactly in my wheelhouse in terms of being like really character driven and interesting, and the plot is a great mystery story, but also like it's got, you know, awesome fantasy elements that are really, really well done. It's not goofy. It's not been that long since it came out, so it's kind of silly of me to say it like really holds up for me. But it holds up on repeat viewings, which is good. I'm really looking forward to season 2. I don't think they've announced a air date for season 2 or a drop date, whatever, for that. Although I am looking forward to The Boys, which is coming out in September 4th, I want to say.
Sounds right. Somewhere
in there. And so The Boys season 2, we did another Out of Frame episode on The Boys. So if you haven't seen that, check it out, audience. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But we're done now, so now I'm back to, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going.
The struggle is real.
No, I'm not going
Love
to
Island.
No, it's definitely
Total Divas.
It's definitely not going to Big Brother.
Oh, goodness.
That's not. I couldn't handle it when it was first on. You know what I could handle was, oh shoot, what was the name of the cartoon? You know, there's a reality show cartoon. Well, now I don't remember the episode, and you guys are giving me nothing. So I got nothing on that.
I'm gonna need slightly more information.
It was a reality show set in like a mix of like weird cartoon characters. Like there's like a Betty Boop character and like a Porky Pig character and like superhero and a couple different things. And I do not remember the name of the show right now. It was only on for 1 season or 2 seasons or something.
I think I do know what you're talking about now, but
I'm here.
The title escapes me.
I'm here for that kind of thing. Not like spoofs of reality shows. I'm here for it. But that's it.
Well, I recently went on vacation.
Oh my goodness.
It was a huge deal, but I didn't watch anything because that felt too much like work for me. So I've been reading books again. Beach reads, really. And
beach reads.
Beach reads. But for me, that means going back and restarting the Dresden Files series.
Because it sounds like you're reading Fabio cover books.
No.
Dresden Files does not sound like beach reads to me.
No.
It's my idea of a beach read.
You, yes.
Okay.
Fair enough.
But Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, there's, I think, 15 of them now.
It's a decent amount.
There's a new one coming out soon. But
It's a lot of books.
This is one of the.
And as we've discussed, Paul doesn't like reading, so 15.
I mean, I know.
I did read a book this week.
He did. He was very proud of himself and told me all about it.
Went to a library.
I went to a library. I got it because I'm actually going on vacation next week to the beach as well. So I got it as a beach read, and then I read it in 2 days. So back to square one.
For somebody who doesn't like books, the idea of you going to a library is a special version of that, because it's not even like I browsed Kindle and found a random book.
Yeah, if I'm going to read, I need.
You went to the place with all the books.
And then it took me about 15 minutes to find the book.
And then had to walk around looking for a book.
That's outstanding.
Oh, my goodness.
But the Dresden Files is one of, it was one of the first big fantasy series set in, a real place. So this is a genre called urban fantasy. It's set in Chicago. And it was one of the first series of that type to actually be really popular. And it's spawned so many really bad urban fantasy books. But
yeah,
Dresden Files, high quality.
This, going back to Carnival Row for a second, because it's sort of similar in the sense that it is a fantasy series set in what is otherwise kind of a realistic world, or it's not in a magical fairy kingdom set thousands and thousands of years ago or whatever. And it's meant to be kind of steampunky and there's modern technology kind of merged into all of this. In that way, I guess, we've talked to people about Legend of Korra, and it's got that kind of vibe to it a little bit, which I really like. But boy, is the genre thin for the good iterations of that kind of stuff. And
it's a problem. And when it's
tough.
done right, the city itself is almost like its own character in the story.
Yeah.
And I think the Dresden Files does a very good job of incorporating the realities of modern day Chicago life into this fantasy world that the general population is largely unaware of, because everybody knows magic isn't real. Don't be ridiculous.
So the whole the city is a character thing is kind of like a cliche, but it's also the kind of thing where you go, that would just be good world building.
Yeah.
It's not, there's nothing special about it. You're oh yeah, New York is a character in the background is, you wrote New York as a complete entity. You didn't just go they were in a place, now we're moving on. Mm-hmm. The place didn't affect the story at all. Who cares, right?
No, it really does affect the story. In fact, I'm to a point in one of the books where our main character, Harry Dresden, is about to ride a T-Rex down Michigan Avenue. It's going to be great.
That is...
I'm looking forward to it.
Does that T-Rex have feathers?
No.
Oh, no.
But he legitimately steals Sue from the Field Museum and reanimates her and rides her.
Well, one thing I've learned from YouTube, from being on YouTube, is that if the book didn't get it exactly right, it's entirely wrong.
Yeah.
So,
no, Harry
feathers.
Dresden would 100% be canceled.
That's not realistic.
On Twitter. Also,
Unacceptable.
he opens doors for women, so that's
oh no.
Yeah.
So maybe that should be our segue into cancel culture, because the part of the reason I think we wanted to talk about this is because it's been something that's, obviously it's something that's kind of boiled over a lot for a lot of people for a long time. But I think lately there have been so many new and bigger examples of this that are expanding really out of, a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, you would see, or really even 4 or 5 years ago, you'd start to see people get canceled or get part of this kind of mob kind of overarching like angry mob kind of coming after different groups of people. And what it was kind of in the beginning would be, Richard Spencer, right? It'd be people who you'd see who are actually saying super inflammatory things, overtly racist stuff, overtly sexist, super bigoted things, and then people get mad. At least that was sort of what got thrown around in the news. Except for really what was going on even back to 2013, 14, somewhere in that territory, was actually a lot of instances of this kind of thing that were happening at colleges and universities that we weren't really hearing about a whole lot, that a couple groups were working on. I mean, ACLU did some stuff back then. They're unfortunately doing less today. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, FIRE, was kind of on the forefront of looking at some of these cases. I remember, this is a long time ago, maybe 2012 or so, there was a professor who got, I don't know if he actually got fired, he got reprimanded maybe because he'd put a Firefly poster from the Joss Whedon show Firefly that was basically the lyrics to the theme song, you can't take the sky from me stuff, and it had a quote from Mal on it that was perceived as being pro-gun, basically, which, to be fair, Mal Reynolds, pro-gun.
Very pro-gun.
And that was, he got complaints that this was like a threat somehow. Like the poster was creating a threatening space on campus, and he was told to remove it and then eventually reprimanded. I got to say, I think he was fired ultimately for that, which is why I think FIRE took the case. But there were those kinds of things that were happening back then. We just weren't talking about them a lot. Now we're into a world where Terry Crews can go on Twitter and say, I think we should have a world where we are all working together. And that is a cancelable offense. So I don't know. It's become such an important issue that we did an Out of Frame feature on it. It's the longest one we've ever done. It was a beast to write and to produce. And I just figured this would be a good time to talk about it on the show here. So we're not doing a movie of the week today. We're just going to talk about the state of culture and the arts and how free speech intersects with all these things. Because I think to do what we want to do here with the behind the scenes show and with Out of Frame and with pretty much everything we're doing requires some ability to discuss complex, interesting, difficult subjects, and to do that in an environment where you're constantly worried that somebody's going to, try to dox you or find out where you live, which has happened a number of times. Yeah. Threaten your family, threaten your friends, try to get you fired, all of those kinds of things. It's disconcerting. So, yeah, I don't know. So I guess I'll open it to you guys. Like what's, when were you guys kind of first aware of this kind of stuff? And
when I went to college, this is 10 years ago now, you knew what you could and couldn't say. And as someone that would identify more libertarian, conservative, I fortunately went to a school that wasn't super strict. I didn't have any teachers that would just say, just not talk to me. But a lot of things just don't talk about.
Sure.
And, but some of my best memories of college is when we got outside of school and it was a group of people that I felt comfortable with, that we could have discussions, and they did not agree with me and I did not agree with them, but it was not in the class. It was outside of that, because that kind of conversation would not be allowed. So it wasn't necessarily a cancel culture then, but it was certainly a watch what you say, because some of those ideas we just can't talk about.
Yeah.
I think probably I became pretty keenly aware of the sort of cultural dynamic, I'd say about 4 years ago. I recently stumbled across an old Facebook post of mine that was like, hey, the world is weird right now. And if I don't want you to think that just because I'm not sharing my hot take of the moment, that I don't think about these things, I don't care about these things, but I value your friendship more than I value being right. So that's why I'm not posting about all this stuff. And this was kind of before the term cancellation was really being used to describe this sort of phenomenon. But I've been aware for years that saying the quote-unquote wrong thing in front of the wrong people would cost you relationships and job opportunities and a lot of things.
So that's fascinating to me, because now I see a lot. In fact, I was at a BLM protest a while back when Atlanta was kind of in the middle of that kind of stuff. And by the way, for the audience, like that was partly in curiosity, because I'm always interested in that kind of thing and what's actually going on the ground, and then actually partly as support for the standpoint of the overarching mission, which is ending police brutality and all that kind of stuff. People, I'm sure, have a lot of different feelings on the official Black Lives Matter kind of movement and the organization and all of that kind of stuff. But, I think part of, for me, not accepting this idea of cancellation on either side of the political spectrum, and we'll talk about where that balance falls, I think, in a bit. But there are people on both sides who want to shut you down for doing certain things. And part of it for me is I look at that kind of stuff and say, I'm interested in open dialogue with people. I'm interested in freedom of expression. I'm interested in peaceful interaction with other human beings to state viewpoints. And that was, I went at a normal time during the day and not like participating in anything like that. But that's what I saw, right? That's what we were doing then, and that I fully support. But even then, there were a lot of signs there that were like, silence is violence, right? Which is kind of disheartening to me. Because this idea that like you a couple years ago could say, hey, I'm like not talking about this stuff because my feelings are complicated and because I'm not sure I'm going to express them the right way, or I don't want to hurt your feelings or somebody else's feelings, and I care about my friendships. And then now you might be harassed because if you said that, you go, well, that means you're supporting whatever bad person, you're not speaking out against or whatever. And it's just like, now we've gone into a new territory of this where it's like now even not saying anything is going to be. We're
redefining words. We're putting people in the impossible position of, you have to make a statement. No, not that statement. You're out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the scariest one for me is any element of redefining violence into, now speech is violence. Now silence is also violence.
That one grinds my gears
but
so
property
much.
Destruction is not violence.
Yeah, but actual violence is not violence.
Actual violence is not violence. Yeah, speech and silence both are somehow violence.
It's very weird. I attribute this mostly to social media.
Yeah,
it's to your example. You are now expected to have an opinion, the right opinion, on pretty much every single issue, and nobody has that. You cannot expect that.
Yeah,
that for anybody.
No,
and for me, that's why even though I'm do social media for fee and I'm on it all day, my personal stuff, I don't really ever post because I just don't want to. I value people's friendships more than scoring points on a platform that I, frankly, at the end of the day, don't care about. And I think in-person conversations always work better and turn out to actually build relationships and even maybe change people's minds than you would ever could even imagine online in a forum or anything like that. And I feel like a lot of our issues stem from people just need to step away from the keyboard and think about, would you say this to someone if they were standing right in front of you? Most of the time, probably not. I mean, sure, you get the people that would be like, yeah, I'll say it, whatever. But think, how would you say that to someone that you care about, that's your friend, that might have those viewpoints that you just cannot stand?
Yeah. So I am kind of the opposite in certain ways, which is, so I don't really use Twitter mostly because I feel like Twitter is not designed for anything other than kind of
hot takes.
Hot takes. That's it. There's no nuance allowed.
And so the nature of that platform doesn't allow for a quality conversation, in my view. But YouTube and Facebook I actually find to be very different because there's no character limit. There's threaded comments also, which I think is helpful. I was actually sort of an early kind of complainer on Facebook shifting to threaded comments, but I actually like it now because you can actually stay a little bit more focused on a single topic. You don't have threads that get threads used to get, they still do sometimes. I mean, it's hard to keep track of any of this stuff, but it got really hard to keep track of like who you were responding to.
Right.
And then in the order of the thread, it'd be like, you know, wouldn't make any sense, right? People would say something and then you would reply to something 4 comments earlier and then it was like completely mad.
Yeah.
But I do use Facebook for the purpose of fostering conversations. And I try to do that with our YouTube, I do that on my personal Facebook, and then I try to do that with our YouTube channel as well. And I do find it to be really effective, but it does take also a lot of work to not just, you know, scream at people and, you know, tell people they're idiots or whatever. And I, you know, I've been in comment threads on YouTube too, where we're actually just adding some of my own perspective on some of the threads, like has actually been able to calm down some people who are kind of fighting with each other, which I like, and I like being able to do that. So I think it's possible.
You are also very rare, though.
Yeah.
Well, so this is another thing I was going to say too. Is I've had conversations recently with friends. So speaking of BLM, for example, I have a black friend who was not saying anything and was feeling a tremendous amount of pressure to say a bunch of stuff about BLM because it's so, I mean, it's so important right now, but also it's just, there's so much social pressure for people. Again, the silence is violence thing, right? So if you're not actively, you know, proactively going out there and saying all of the right things, you know, you become a suspect in this kind of world. And he was telling me like, he doesn't feel super confident in his ability to express his thoughts in a verbal or text sort of medium in prose, right? He doesn't feel like he can express his thoughts in a way that actually works that well. And so he has been hesitant to actually go out there and make a whole bunch of statements about this kind of stuff. And so to that point, like I've been doing that kind of thing, like writing the way that I think and writing down thoughts and publishing that kind of stuff for a long time. And I am pretty good at it as far as it goes. And then I think about all the people I know who like actually aren't, even in different contexts, sometimes they are, sometimes they just aren't in every context, just not super eloquent or not super good at written expression.
Writing is hard.
Writing is hard.
Right? Communication, full stop. Is difficult.
And so to like harass somebody like that and to say, no, you must participate and you must say something is like really pressuring somebody into one, a super uncomfortable position, and two, like a position where they're more likely to get in trouble than to say the right thing because they're just not used to doing that kind of communication. And honestly, my advice to my friend was just don't let anybody push you around. Like if you're not comfortable with it, don't, you know, and kind of to hell with it. But at the same time, that's, again,
a cancelable offense,
it's
apparently.
A cancelable offense too. So that gets where it's tricky. And one of the things I want to talk with you guys about too is the alternate view of this that I've heard, especially recently, is basically cancel culture doesn't exist, which
I've heard that claim made.
And so I want to be clear about something. There are people that I've met, a lot of people that I've met, who flat out just deny that it happens. And really what they're doing is denying that it happens to anybody who doesn't deserve it, right? There are people who look at, you know, again, going back to Richard Spencer and say, well, it's all a bunch of Richard Spencer.
It's a Nazi.
He's Nazi. They're all Nazis. That's what's happening. Of course, I have a list in front of me of people who've been fired or forced to resign or whatever.
Well, and also just go like when you start calling people that are just mainstream ideas Nazis, then it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of
Yeah,
people. Right.
it is a lot of people. And I do want to make clear that there is a distinction between having public disagreement to what you've said on social media and being canceled. Those aren't the same thing.
No, and we do need to make that distinction too, because a cancellation, as far as it goes, is really more a matter of a really illiberal facet of culture, something that's not necessarily being carried out by government, but it's something that is being carried out nonetheless to stop somebody from being able to speak. So going to somebody's public event and who they have been invited to and who people have bought tickets for and all of that kind of stuff, and instead of allowing that person to speak, you go with noisemakers and you go with, wire cutters, and you try to physically prevent them from being heard. That's a pretty good example of that, right? Similarly, doxing people, trying to threaten them or harass them or otherwise intimidate them into not speaking, or just trying to get them booted from a platform. We've seen this on Twitter, YouTube, other places.
Or from a job. Some people just go straight for the employment.
Sometimes they go straight for the employment.
You're going to come after someone's livelihood?
It's a serious threat, right? And so what I would say to anybody who thinks that these are sort of appropriate tactics is that, like, you really need to think, like, first of all, you need to maybe understand that, like, your momentary perspective is not the total extent of the person that you're trying to attack. Like, just because you see one tweet or just because you see one statement does not mean you know everything there is to know about that person's life or their thoughts or feelings. So have a little bit of humility on that end, which I think is important. But also, like, there are instances where I think people should lose their careers essentially for things that they say. I think, like there was a guy, Blake Neff, who worked for Tucker Carlson, who recently was found out to have been participating a lot on super racist private internet forums.
Yeah.
And I read through some of that stuff, and it was really awful. And one of the things I talk about in the Out of Frame episode on the overall subject is that, context in speech is the most important thing. It's how we know what meaning the speech has. And so he's making a bunch of racist jokes, but, like, in the context of the thread, this is not Dave Chappelle, right? This is not a joke that is meant to illuminate some unifying fact of humanity.
He's making racist jokes in a racist forum.
Yeah.
To perpetuate racism.
Yeah, and it was bad. And so he was a important writer for Tucker Carlson's show, and you can't have that. Like, unless you want to
unless that's your brand.
Unless that's your brand, but, like, you can't have somebody who's in a position where their job is to put words on TV.
Right.
Unless you want to identify with those words that he actually believes, like, you're going to have problems, right? So I don't have a problem with every instance of that, but you really have to earn it. Like, you have to, like, really,
Yeah. It's going to have to be a case-by-case decision, first of all, because what one employer is going to find maybe not acceptable behavior, but tolerable behavior is not going to be the same as some other employer. And the outrage mob shouldn't be the one making that decision for those employers.
Right. So the other thing I've heard from the sort of cancel culture doesn't exist crowd is that they're not really saying that it doesn't exist, but that it has always existed, and that there have always been cancellations, but now the targets are changed. And I have some major sympathy with aspects of that argument. Obviously, we live in a world where, just 20, roughly, not even 20 years ago, gay marriage, for example, was not legally allowed across the board in the United States. Prior to that, going back another 15 years or so, like pretty awful. Like, if you came out as gay, you might face some serious consequences at work, or, if you were trying to be a public figure or something, that would be a scandal.
In some places, it was just flat out illegal.
Flat out illegal in a lot of cases, right? So I think that those kinds of things are very clear examples where you could define that as the same kind of thing. And we did an episode of Out of Frame before on the Parents Music Resource Council, which is actually what I think is the more, it's the better analog, I think.
Yeah.
Because I don't tend to think of things like Jim Crow or, discrimination based on gender or sexual orientation as cancel culture. I don't in general, because I don't think they are really about, I think, first of all, they're much bigger and much more legally ensconced issues.
Yeah.
And they are much less about people using social ostracism alone, I should say,
Yeah.
to impose a certain narrow set of viewpoints, so much as that they are just flat out, your race is bad, or your gender is bad, or your sexual orientation is bad. And maybe I'm making a distinction that nobody else cares about, but when I think of cancel culture from the 80s, 90s, whatever, I think of PMRC. I think of the sort of nagging crowd of like kind of religious right moms who came out and said that, AC/DC was satanic, and that, that NWA was promoting gang violence, and, and that more importantly, nobody should be allowed to hear any of this stuff, right?
So I think what changed is that we made fun of those people.
Right.
And now we listen to them.
Right.
That is a big and important difference.
No,
we didn't take any of them seriously.
Yeah, and that is the biggest issue to me, is that going back to the way that artists especially handled the PMRC types is, one, they spoke out against them in congressional hearings and said, nope, we have a First Amendment in this country. I don't care what you think I should or shouldn't be allowed to say. We're going to say whatever we want. Which, if you haven't listened to some of the PMRC hearings from 1985, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister makes one of the most eloquent defenses of free speech anyone's ever done.
What a legend.
Oh, it's amazing, right?
It's choice.
And I will say I think it's lesser appreciated, but both Frank Zappa's and Bob Denver's also awesome. Great.
Yes.
But yeah, so one, they were actually super active in fighting back against that idea, but also they were proactively making fun of those people on Saturday, like Church Lady, right? Like Dana Carvey's Church Lady is just utter mockery of that kind of busybody.
It's just the same type of people, just targeted at a different medium and a different person. So it's like, what has changed?
The other thing I think has changed is scope. By which I mean the range of things that you could potentially cancel today is a lot wider.
Yep.
I mean, then it was like, Janet Jackson, accidental nudity on TV, right? That would be, oh my God, we have to put an end to this, and we have to stop sex and violence on television or in song lyrics, stuff like that. We have to stop that. Now, the range is pretty much universal at this point, because the wrong word choice.
Yes.
Even if Patton Oswalt did a great special 2 years ago, where one of the things he did was tell two different versions of the same basic idea. One in a very erudite, like upscale, high vocabulary way, saying really awful racist things. And then one talking as if he was like a sort of Southern Bubba redneck type, saying really kind things and not racist things, but which sounded racist because he's using the wrong words and he's saying, things in a really awkward way. But Patton's point, and it was a really funny bit, but Patton's point was that, like, you need to listen to the meaning and not just the terminology. If somebody just used like the wrong word, like,
well, I think
you may be missing the point.
I wonder if a lot of the meaning behind words are lost because we're just reading them on a screen.
Yeah.
There is a lot of that I feel sure of, because there's no sarcasm font. There's
Right.
no, this is satire punctuation mark. I mean, you just kind of have to assume that anything that's written down is meant to be taken seriously. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And that gets to the other thing I think is totally different now than it was in the 80s. I mean, it's the most obvious sort of elephant in the room. It's just the internet. I mean, having if you were, let's say you were like a metalhead in 1992, right? Mm-hmm. And you were listening to Black Sabbath or you're listening to Ozzy or something like that, you might have your mom come in and say, oh no, you can't listen to that. You might have somebody come on the nightly news, like a Tipper Gore type, come on the nightly news and say, you're a bad person for listening to these kinds of things, right?
Or your Sunday school teacher.
Or your Sunday school teacher, whomever, right? You would encounter a couple people here and there who'd be like, oh, what are you listening to? Oh, that's horrible. Now, just by product of mass communication, if you happen to be on the wrong side of that line, you'll encounter thousands of people very quickly.
Who've never met you never will.
Never will, don't know anything about you, don't know how you feel about anything, haven't had a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. But by goodness, they will destroy you.
Yes.
That's the concerning part to me, I think.
Yeah. That is why I strongly dislike social media. There's nothing really social about it.
Yeah, it's weird. And I think we're all sitting around here as people who do social media related stuff for a living.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. And I have that concern. And part of it is because I'm on social media so much. It's because I see that kind of stuff. I mean, I mentioned Terry Crews earlier, but I was thinking about recently. I can't get into the specifics of this because this is a music nerd thing that would take me on a wild tangent. But there's a professor at the University of North Texas that just got fired over a dispute with he's a musicologist or a music theory professor who got in a dispute with another music theory or really musicologist who had written a paper saying that this one very important figure in music theory, Heinrich Schenker, was a racist, and therefore his ideas are invalid. And the professor at UNT said, well, that's not how it works, really. Like he may have been a racist. I mean, he was right turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. And so, yeah, but like his ideas are still good. And so, fireable offense. University of North Texas is one of the best music schools in the country. Schenker's ideas in theory are super interesting too, And
this has nothing to do with his racist beliefs, I'm guessing.
Oh,
literally nothing.
His musical theory,
right? That's
no
ideas,
nothing at all,
Art.
Nothing whatsoever, right? So no, Schenker. Again, this is where the tangent could go wildly off the rails here, but Schenker basically created a system of analysis that allows you to sort of boil down a piece of music into a couple really fundamental elements. So imagine taking like a score that looks just dense with black notes, throughout the page. And it's really complex looking piece of music. And then boiling that down to like a single bar showing like 6 notes, for example. I'm oversimplifying this a lot because this is whatever, but his idea was to see the underlying fundamental structure of a piece and then compare those across what he considered to be the great works of art. And so he was comparing Western music. The thing is, you can use the overarching theory to apply to all kinds of music. It doesn't have to be basically late 19th, like 18th and 19th century European romantic, neo-romantic classical music. Like, it doesn't have to be that. You can use it for a lot of other things. And so stuff like that is happening. I'm looking here, I'm thinking about J.K. Rowling, recently wrote a really interesting, and you may disagree with a large percentage of it, but a very thoughtful discussion of the sort of her views on the differences between trans women and biological women. And it got, her fans super outraged, right? But you can't read the thing that she wrote and think that she was hateful. Like, it wasn't a hateful, bigoted thing. It was a intellectual discussion of different ideas. Again, you can disagree.
And now we're not allowed to like Harry Potter.
And now we're not allowed to like Harry Potter. But I think that's where it comes back to it for me, is like, we have to be allowed to disagree with each other respectfully, right? Like, there has to be a way to engage in discussion and debate without like trying to destroy each other's lives, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I'm fully on board with that. It's just, man, there's so much out there. So many people talking over each other and past each other and using the same words but in different ways. Nobody's bothering to try to understand what anybody is saying anymore. And it's incredibly frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to sort of wrap this part of the discussion up, like, what do you guys think can be done about it? I mean, how do you feel about sort of what are the solutions to this?
Well, what I'm working on is raising 2 decent human beings. That's the best I can come up with. And just doing better myself in not necessarily moderating what I say, but trying to understand where other people are coming from and acknowledging that someone else's experiences are not ever going to be the same as my experiences, and just having some humility when I come into a conversation. Going into a conversation like it's a conversation, like I'm there to learn something from you, and hopefully you are there to learn something from me. It's got to be individually based. It can't be blanket policies set by social media companies. That's never going to work. No. It's got to be an individual decision to make the world a better place, even if it's just your one Twitter feed, you know?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I would also throw in there, make fun of these people.
Also, yes.
They are like every step throughout history, we make fun of the people like, oh, old fashioned, they won't let you say or wear what you want. And now we're listening to them.
And it's so funny.
Blows my mind.
That kind of, and again, make fun of, don't try to ruin their lives either. No. But like, because then you're just it's just more enemies and more escalation and whatever. But like the kind of, again, the church lady sketches and stuff like that. Or there's a phenomenal Fry and Laurie sketch. It's one of my all-time favorite comedy sketches with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, but where they kind of make fun of one of these network censor type like this broadcast TV lady who comes in and complains. But like making fun of those people is also how we ended up with way more freedom for people who were previously being canceled, right? For the artists and musicians who wanted to engage in forms of expression that were taboo at one point in time, right? To bring blues musicians and rock musicians and then metal and rap and all of these things out of the fringe and into the mainstream, that happened because people just looked at the censors and said, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? And so I guess if you have something else to add, actually you do that before I don't know if you had something else you wanted to include, but.
And I would just echo what Jim was saying is build those relationships in your life and just be a good person. Yeah. And I know that's us saying that, but that's one thing. But it's I think that's the biggest thing that people can change is treat people not only how you want to be treated, just even more so. Just
being angry. Being angry is exhausting.
Yeah.
So maybe do a little self-care and cool it down a bit.
I think that's what I want to end on, really, is like not caring what other people think because you have something that you think is important to say is absolutely important. not caring what people think because you want to hurt other people's feelings is not a really good way to live either. So
Right.
don't be the person who cancels other people, but also don't be the person who goes out of your way to try to make everybody hate you. You know, like it doesn't have to be this hard. I think social media's made this stuff a lot harder than it really needs to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like either we just break down into tribes and yell at each other and get angry and whatever, or we could all just chill out a little bit. So I think that's where we'll end
Yeah.
today. To all the people who are listening right now, thank you. We appreciate you. If you are a patron, stick around. We're going to have a little bit more on this discussion. We're going to talk specifically about the Out of Frame episode on Tropic Thunder. And if you're not a patron currently, please consider signing up at patreon.com/outofframeshow. And otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.